Please welcome Bob Hicok.
This is called in Michael Robbins' Class -1. At the desk where the boy sat, he sees the Chicago River. It raises its hand. It asks if metaphor should burn. He says, fire is the basis for all forms of the mouth. He asks, why did you fill the boy with your going? I didn't know a boy had been added to me, the river says. Would you have given him back if you knew? I think so, the river says. I have so many boys in me. I'm worn out, stroking eyes, looking up at the day. Have you written a poem for us? He asks the river, and the river reads its poem. And the other students tell the river it sounds like a poem the boy would have written. That they smell the boy's cigarettes in the poem. They feel his teeth biting the page. And the river asks, did this boy dream of horses? Because I suddenly dream of horses. I suddenly dream. They're in a circle and the river says, I've never understood round things. Why would leaving come back to itself? And a girl makes a kiss with her mouth and leans it against the river. And the kiss flows away, but the river wants it back. The river makes sounds to go after the kiss. And they all make sounds for the river to carry to the boy. And the river promises to never surrender the boy's shape to the ocean. I can't remember jokes to save my life. Not that that ever comes up. That would be horrifying. You must remember a joke or we'll kill you. This is called Excerpts from My Difficulty Telling Jokes. A shadow of a penis walks into a bar. No. A bar realizes it's a rabbi. No. A pope shits on a bear. Yes. A pope shits on a bear. Now we need a new pope. We have the bloody pointy hat, just not the pope. A bear walks into a bar and asks, what goes with pope? Fries, of course. How many light bulbs does it take to screw in the dark? 4. I'll just stop there. I lived for most of my life in Michigan, and if you lived in a similar place by about February or March, you just hate the look of snow. This is called hard work as its own reward. February in Detroit. A kid goes door to door asking if people would like their snow washed. One man looks at the corpse of winter at the edge of his drive and replies, how much? The kid stares up and to the left, shifting his mind into calculator mode. $1 million, he says finally. Remembering a TV show in which a man in a purple suit said to a woman wearing nothing but a mink coat, winners aim high. The man feels this is a lot, but is worn down by the assault of grime. How about I promise to save your life one day, the man counters. The kid thinks of all the ways there are to die. Gunshots on DeQuinder, gunshots on Woodward, gunshots in the bathroom, and agrees to this unspecified moment of deliverance. The snow, when he's done, seems fresh fallen from the machine of the sky. The two of them shake hands. I'm your angel now, the man says. The boy wonders if angels are real. They're not, the man says, reading the boy's mind. Nor are these wings, he adds, taking his coat off. Nor are we flying, he says, scooping the boy into his arms and flying away from the shadow of their flying. There's someone in my wife's extended family who had one of those horrible experiences that I've heard about through the years, but you hear about it less and less. He basically survived World War II by living in what amounted to a hole in the ground. And I spent a wedding hanging out with him. This poem is about that. It's called Purity Erased. It just occurred to me it'd be horrible to give a preface and then find you don't have that poem in front of you, but that's not the case. He'll be dead soon, who lived in a hole, ate roots during the war. I walked with him at a wedding as he cruised the ruins of plates, most everyone gone to dance, to lift bride and groom on chairs in the air, and admired him as I love dogs, who treat food from a hand on the floor with an equality of appetite. This was 15, 20 years ago. I'm a terrible clock. Dead soon, one of the last pair of eyes in which you can try to see the mirage of Hitler. I liked standing apart with him near the door waiters flowed through, the honesty of his stare at every tray hovering by. I dream I eat my own stomach, he told me. A closed loop of need? Or was that from a documentary about people with names and faces like his? I'm a terrible book. Soon there will be no more bubbies with blue numbers on arms, no more watching a man make a harvest of waste. The mirror's covered a last time so grief can't see its own face. We'll have stories told by people who like to tell us stories, not stories told by people who wish none of it were true. I'm a wonderful liar. And it won't be true slowly. Like nothing is that ever happened unless it happened to you. It will be dead soon, the war that lived as a man refusing to let the scraps of a T-bone go until there was nothing but a clean white letter in his hands. Whither thou goest. Fish can have mad cow disease, and I have a problem with that. Purity suffers, and salmon can't moo, can't paw the grass with the furious strokes, the essential bovine faith that there's something in the earth for everyone. All along I've wanted the good days to be the good days and not good from 12 to 3, not good like drilling your teeth is good when it stops, but good like moonlight on my wife's hip with the sheets pulled back and her hair riotous and misconstrued. That's one thing and not another. That's the best use of a bed and two bodies, working out the most inclusive form of redemption known in the universe this side of black holes, which is where I want to be, considering that on the other side of black holes, fish with mad cow disease are indistinguishable from Komodo dragons who play power forward in the NBA. I'm not ashamed to admit my prayers are no longer unconscious, but loud and practiced, to the skin of the mirror, to the muse of the cereal box, to the road as I drive everywhere trying to find the last 3/8 drill this city has, because I don't believe in God, but trust that pushing veneration through my body makes God exist, if only for a second, within the chambered nuances of breath. In my favorite prayer, I apologize for not having shouted earlier and in public, say from the back of the subway, the top of a table in a Fort Worth bar, that whither thou goest, I will follow. This should be said every day and with no substitutions for the archaic whither, which is the tender part, the broken wheel of the phrase. This should be repeated like the turbulence of blood repeats harmonically, or at least until it's understood that even if the way things are becomes the way they are not, I'll be there when mad cows attack, when madder fish swim back through the streams, when a black hole shows up at the door wearing a tie and promising to suck all dirt, all evil, all manner of woe from this life, and smiling in a fashion that breaks your knees. Whither or when thou goest, how and why you flee, in what manner or mode you glide or thrash, there's the mercy of the bond. There's the moment you wake or refuse to ever sleep again. There's still your face when the wind's so fat it curls in the field to lick its wounds. And my promise to be there, conspicuously mad in my devotion. I tell myself the future. When my father dies, naturally I want to call him and tell him my father has died. He won't pick up. I'll decide he's out raking leaves, that leaves are sullen, that I'm hungry, that my father hasn't died. And when he finally answers, I'll stand in the kitchen wondering why I called. Most of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich completed. All that will remain is for the parts to be joined, the jelly to the peanut butter wing. I'll tell my father I'm cooking. He'll nod and I'll hear him nod. I read that poem to my wife and I was surprised by the number of stories she told me about people over the years who've told her that when someone important to them died, they would pick up the phone or they would do things that they had done with that person or to contact that person. This poem's called Everything's Fine. To read my poems in Arizona about global warming, I'll have to get on a plane and contribute to global warming. I can offset this by dying 3 months early or killing an industrialist. If I kill an industrialist, I'll go to prison now, but be a hero in years to come. When the Arctic has completely melted, no more yarmulke on the earth. We're thinking of getting solar, but it costs so much I'll have to read my poems about global warming wherever I can. But who wants to hear poems about global warming? They're hard to make sexy, since no one has made out with the climate or smoked a cigarette with the sun. And they sound like scolding, like I'm telling the Industrial Revolution to go to bed without supper. I prefer to write poems about the wardrobe of my soul, or the symbolism of yo-yos, or exile as a contact sport. But there's another heat advisory. I call them breathing optional days. At least we've tried everything we can to do nothing. You have to admire our faith that natural selection will reward those whose skin is leather. And I, too, am looking forward to Oceanside property in Michigan. Yes, I will read my poems about global warming in Arizona. Thank you for asking, for picking me up in a limo, for cranking the air, for showing the desert who's boss. We're the boss. Our big brains are how you can tell. This podium is strange. It's metal. This is called The Job. I could get no one to take his shit seriously, beautiful as it was. Clouds that resembled priests. A horse at full stride on the window with the steel mesh inside. An impossibly long and wistful screwing of swans across the white wall in the game room. It was like working inside a Rorschach test. I never knew how I'd see myself in the smears. He didn't talk, but smiled like someone who could pull art out of his ass. Until doctors worked out a dosage I had to admire. His mind pinned like monarchs and swallowtails on plywood when I was a kid by boys who wanted an A in biology. The Latin names typed on wisps of paper below. The wings perfect at first, though soon dull, torn, broken away. How many of those boys are doctors now, lifting a skirt, cutting into a brain? I've made them monsters, how rude. They're fathers and ghosts. It's just that I'm still hurt by Lithium's critique of his medium. He seemed so Boy Scoutish, resourceful and all that. Completely American, full of gumption and resolve. A hero to me, who cleaned up what he was trying to say for minimum wage, and read him poems about poems written in prison. All those Russian and South Americans who made do with blood and less vital alphabets. Poems that don't exist, but survived. A family matter. Of course, when my mother asked that I give my wife a kiss for her, I did so, telling my wife I am my mother, kissing you. My wife's mother, it turns out, had asked the same. So of course she told me I am my mother, kissing you back. When we informed our mothers later that they had kissed as lesbians through heterosexual proxy, beside our cat's sense that something like a mouse, or with the potential to be a mouse, would eventually move through the spot she was staring at, where nothing was or had ever been as far as the record shows, my mother asked, was tongue involved? My wife and I consulted the log, but there was no entry. We shrugged at our mothers and went about our lives. Though now with an awareness there are gaps we'll never fill, that may or may not have tongues in them. Though given a vote, I say yes. Tongues red like our mouths are where flames go to be alone. The tree of knowledge. In the morning, the tree he chopped down the day before was fine. He chopped it down, burned it. The next day, it was fine. Chopped it down, burned it, spread the ashes among the open graves of the city. The next day, it was fine. This kept happening, and every day after his chopping and burning and spreading were done, he went to the library and read as much as he could. History, philosophy, literature. Hoping for an explanation of the tree, even if just a phrase or two. There was a chair that became his chair, a table his table. They even put a nail in the wall from which he could hang his axe. He learned so much, people lined up to ask him questions. What does a shiver weigh? Is there any way a man could be a jackal and not know it? When estimating a harvest, do you pay more attention to rain or hunger? What's the best recipe for apple cake? It was believed that at the end of his life, he knew everything except what he'd wanted to know. The day after they buried him, they found his coffin on the ground. They buried him again, but the next day found his coffin on the ground. They buried him cement, but the next day found his coffin on the ground. The man who ran the cemetery scratched and scratched his head. Eventually this hurt. Eventually he went to the library. There was an empty chair, and the sunlight petting the empty chair seemed to ask him to sit. He sat. He touched where someone had scratched with a pen into the table. I will miss the whisper of a book as it opens. He got a book, a blue book, a small book, a book worn smooth as if read over and over by an ocean, put an ear to its mouth, and opened. Speaking American. When he learned I'm a poet, he asked if I knew this other poet. We don't all know each other, I told him. As he informed me, she likes cheese similes. Love is like cheese, time is like cheese. Cheese is surprisingly like cheese. Then I said, I know this poet, and he went, see? He went, see means he said, see, but you know that if you're American and alive. I explained that I know this poet means I know her work. When he was like, work? When he was like is like he went, which is past tense of he goes, in case you're from another country and confused by our lack of roundabouts. But poetry isn't work, he said, unless you're talking about reading it. But I'm not talking about reading it, I went, in a moment that was the future past of everything I do from then on. Such as snag the last of the hyacinth cookies and step onto the veranda to be awed by stars. Where I went, it's hard work to be awed by stars. They're just little lights about which we learn a song as children. And he was like, but I do wonder what they are. As both of us lifted our heads like birds waiting for our mother to throw up in our mouths. When I shared the image, he was like, gross. But then he went, you're right, that's what we do. We expect the sky to feed us. This led to a long discussion about yearning in which the word yearning never appeared. In which he went and I went and he was like and I was like and the stars kept doing what the song says they do. Because burn your hydrogen, little star, doesn't fit the diatonic harmony that pivots on an opposition between tonic and dominant in a tune derived from ah, vous direz, je m'aime. Then a woman came out wearing a red dress the size of a whisper. Lit a smoke, and the smoke's smoke acted all floaty and sexy and better than us. And she was like, want one? And we were like, yes. I'm going to end with a poem called A Primer, or as some people prefer, a primer. You're crazy. I remember Michigan fondly as the place I go to be in Michigan. The right hand of America waving from maps, or the left pressing into clay a mold to take home from kindergarten to mother. I lived in Michigan 43 years. The state bird is a chained factory gate. The state flower is Lake Superior, which sounds egotistical, though it's merely cold and deep as truth. A Midwesterner can use the word truth, can sincerely use the word sincere. In truth, the Midwest is not mid or west. When I go back to Michigan, I drive through Ohio. There is off I-75 in Ohio a mosque, so life goes corn, 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 mosque. I wave at Islam, which we're not getting along with on account of the towers as I pass. Then Ohio goes corn, 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 billboard. Goodbye, Islam. You never forget how to be from Michigan when you're from Michigan. It's like riding a bike of ice and fly fishing. The Upper Peninsula is a spare state in case Michigan goes flat. I live now in Virginia, which has no backup plan, but is named the same as my mother. I live in my mother again, which is creepy, but so is what the skin under my chin is doing. Suddenly there's a pouch like marsupials are needed. The state joy is spring. Osiris, we beseech thee, rise and give us baseball. That's how we might sound, were we Egyptian in April, when February hasn't ended. February is 13 months long in Michigan. We are a people who by February want to kill the sky for being so gray and angry at us. What did we do is the state motto. There's a day in May when we're all tumblers. Gymnastics is everywhere. And daffodils are asked by young men to be their wives. When a man elopes with a daffodil, you know where he's from. In this way, I have given you a primer. Let us all be from somewhere. Let us tell each other everything we can. Thank you very much for listening.